Sometimes, the toughest challenge in life isn't facing what's in front of us, but turning inward and dealing with old wounds that refuse to heal. In a quiet little town where everything seems unchangeable, Emily Parker appeared to be living a life of calm and purpose. But beneath the surface of that tranquility, her soul carried scars no one could see. How many times have you felt like your fiercest battle was with the marks left by your past? How far can someone go when everything they believe in is put to the test? What happens when learning to trust others transforms into learning to trust yourself again? Get ready for a real, moving, and surprising story. A journey through loss, new beginnings, and a quiet strength that can change lives. What is this force that can set a heart free? And what if everything you need to move forward is already inside you, just waiting for one courageous step? Dive into Emily's journey and discover what lies behind forgiveness, a path that not only reshapes the past but also opens new doors to the future. Emily Parker was born on a chilly February morning in Millersburg, a quaint, tucked-away town surrounded by green prairies in rural Ohio. At 38, everyone in town knew her as one of the most caring nurses at the local hospital. Always smiling, Emily carried a rare serenity, as if life's worries stopped right at her doorstep. The only child of two retired teachers, she grew up in a modest house filled with books, plants, and family mementos, where honesty and respect were values deeply rooted from her earliest days. Even as a kid, Emily stood out for her empathy and her gift for listening, qualities that naturally led her to nursing. She didn't choose this path just because it was a calling, but because she genuinely wanted to make a difference for those who needed it most, even amid the simplicity of small-town life. There was nothing she loved more than starting her day with a walk to work, greeting neighbors along the route, and feeling like she truly belonged to that microcosm of friendships, routines, and little traditions. With expressive brown eyes and gently wavy hair, Emily's beauty was simple, but what really stood out was her gentle way of being. Dedicated, responsible, always soft-spoken, her commitment to others' well-being shone through in every gesture. Whether she was caring for lonely seniors, sick children, or her exhausted co-workers on overnight shifts, friends would say Emily had a reassuring presence, the sort that could calm even the most troubled hearts with just a look of understanding. She'd been married since her 20s to Mark, her high school sweetheart and constant companion. With Mark, Emily dreamed of building a family, traveling to far-off places, and growing old together as they watched their children play in the backyard of the home they shared. On every wedding anniversary, the couple renewed their vows, celebrating the wins and weathering the losses with a bond that inspired everyone around them. Emily's days were lined with simple rituals that gave her life meaning. Sunday morning coffee brewed just right, evening walks in the park, family dinners, and weekly visits to her parents. Everything seemed to be in its place, as if nothing could shake that delicate balance. At the hospital, she was often chosen to lead charity drives and motivate the team on hard days. She felt proud to be part of every story of hope that passed through her care, grateful to be able to heal, listen, and comfort others at their most vulnerable. At night, after her shift ended, Emily liked to sit on the porch and watch the sky change colors, thinking about how much joy there was in life's simple moments. Her routine might seem repetitive to someone longing for adventure, but to her, real happiness was found in the little things. The hug of a patient who got better, the sweet messages from Mark, the phone calls to her mom. With a generous heart and quiet faith, Emily believed that as long as there was love, anything was possible. Yet, behind the calm of her daily life, there were unfulfilled dreams and fears she never spoke out loud. Now and then, she'd look at old photos from her youth and feel a bittersweet wave of nostalgia. She wasn't unhappy, but she knew that life, even at its most beautiful, was never a guarantee. Still, she carried on, trusting her path was being shaped by something bigger than circumstance. She never could have imagined that the true test of her strength and faith would come from where she least expected it. Millersburg, with its protective calm, was about to witness one of the most profound and difficult transformations in Emily's life. A change that would shake everything she believed about trust, love, and, above all, what it means to forgive. Her carefully ordered world would be thrown into question, forcing her to see not only others but also herself in a new light. And so began the most challenging, and perhaps most liberating chapter of her journey. Emily's harmonious routine was shattered one Thursday afternoon, when she unexpectedly stumbled upon a string of messages on Mark's phone. At first, she assumed it was just a coworker asking for advice, but it didn't take long for the true nature of the messages to become obvious. Her husband had been carrying on a secret relationship for months, with someone from their own town, a familiar face at the hospital. The shock was overwhelming. Emily felt the ground vanish beneath her feet, her breath turning shaky, her heart pounding with a blend of disbelief and searing pain. When she confronted Mark with the proof, his silence confirmed everything, a moment that split Emily's life into a distinct before and after. In the days that followed, Emily tried her best to keep up appearances, but every gesture from Mark felt hollow, every happy memory now tainted by a sense of raw betrayal. Work at the hospital, once her safe harbor, became a trigger for anxiety. Problems that she used to solve with calm now completely unraveled her. Slowly, Emily began to withdraw, turning down invitations, avoiding interactions, barely speaking with her parents, who could sense her pain but couldn't grasp its depth. At night, lying awake, she'd replay every detail of her marriage, from those first dates to recent moments of partnership, in a desperate attempt to understand where it all went wrong. Her mind flipped against her. Was she loving enough? Had she missed the signs? Self-blame piled onto her shoulders, fueling a cycle of guilt and resentment. It felt like her strength had dried up. Emily saw no way out. As the weeks dragged on, a gulf opened up between them. Mark, ashamed and evasive, tried to justify himself, but all Emily could hear was empty explanation, never true remorse. Every attempt at conversation only bred more bitterness, turning their home from a place of comfort into a space of tension and emotional distance. Emily cried in secret, too afraid to let even her closest friends see her this fragile. The fear of judgment was constant. In tiny Millersburg, where everyone knew everyone, every trip to the grocery store felt like a test. Emily felt the stares, caught whispers behind closed doors. If you're enjoying our journey, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell so you won't miss out on more stories narrated right here on our channel. She started to doubt her own reputation, question whether her pain mattered, and felt more exposed and vulnerable than ever before. Disappointment began spilling over into her work. No matter how hard she tried, her usual empathy gave way to impatience. A new nurse kindly confessed she'd noticed the change in Emily's mood, confirmation for Emily that she really was losing her grip on who she was. The guilt ate at her. How could she care for anyone else if she couldn't even care for herself? Loneliness turned into thick walls around her heart. Emily distanced herself from friends, who nervously hesitated to pry. Her parents, worried, tried reaching out, but she withdrew even more. All she wanted was a brief escape, a moment's relief from the pain, something no medical book could ever provide. Over time, even the dreams she once cherished seemed to fade away. Trips she and Mark had planned were cancelled. The longing to build a family dissolved amid doubt and insecurity. Deep down, Emily feared not just another betrayal, but the chilling prospect of never being able to trust or love fully again. She considered running away, starting over in a different city, but couldn't find the strength even to imagine a future. Sleep became scarce. Tears were constant. Emily tried praying, searched for comfort in self-help books, but found little solace. At the hospital, patients noticed her tired eyes. The chief doctor suggested some time off, but Emily felt trapped in a colorless routine. The pain of betrayal wasn't just about losing Mark. It was about losing herself. Even as spring came and flowers bloomed in her garden, all Emily saw inside was winter. And so, in the stillness, the distance, and the internal struggles, she started to see that her true battle wasn't just with the betrayal itself, but with what it had unleashed within her own heart, the challenge of not letting bitterness shape the rest of her life. Emily's first step was the hardest, admitting to herself that she couldn't keep living in survival mode. She finally decided to take some days away from the hospital, even though the idea of looking weak made her hesitate. At home, she let herself mourn the life she'd lost, crying openly, writing letters to Mark she'd never send, pouring out her grief, anger, and insecurity onto paper. Writing became her silent way to bring order to the chaos and carve out meaning from the pain. What once felt like giving up slowly revealed itself to be a tiny act of courage. In a moment of clarity, Emily realized she couldn't heal alone. She reached out to a spiritual support group at a nearby church, even though she'd never been a regular there. Within the group, she found understanding glances, few questions, and lots of listening, the very thing she'd needed without knowing it. Each meeting, she felt a little less alone, recognizing threads of her own story in others' words. For a moment, it was as if her pain was finally allowed to exist, free from judgment. Next, Emily took her parents' advice and reached out to a local therapist. She was hesitant at first, but little by little, she opened up during the sessions, sharing her anxiety attacks, her paralyzing fear, and her emotional confusion. The therapist helped her recognize patterns of self-criticism and learn to accept her feelings without blaming herself. In time, Emily began to reclaim the small routines that once brought her joy. Cooking old family recipes, taking evening walks, and picking up unfinished books. Every simple act became a quiet reminder that she was still here, still present in the world. Returning to work demanded an extra dose of strength. In the hospital hallways, Emily forced herself to say good morning, to get out of bed even when she didn't want to care for patients with the same signature care, even when her spirit lagged behind. Gradually, the practice of caregiving, which had always been outward, began to work on herself too. She recognized the importance of asking for help from her coworkers, agreed to share shifts, and grew closer to a few younger nurses who brought some much-needed lightness to her long days. During support group meetings, Emily met Grace, an older woman in the final stages of cancer. Out of appointments and goodbyes, a surprising friendship was born. Grace shared stories of acceptance and courage, inspiring Emily with a simple truth. Moving on is hard, my dear, but holding on to anger is even heavier. Slowly, spending time with Grace lit up a quiet path inward, where forgiveness began, even if Emily didn't realize it at first. Emily also picked up old habits she'd once let go of. Tending her garden, updating family pictures in the living room, playing piano on silent nights. Each small daily victory, sleeping better for a night, laughing at a silly joke, letting herself look at Mark without immediate resentment, was celebrated with gratitude. The process was far from linear. Better days gave way to relapse and anguish, but now there was hope again. Patience with herself was, perhaps, her greatest initial lesson. At times, Emily was tempted to judge her own progress or become frustrated with her limits. But little by little, she learned to see each small step forward as a kind of resistance against suffering. She worked to view herself not merely as a victim, but as an active protagonist in her own life, someone who could choose how to respond to pain. The support of her parents was indispensable. Never pushing, always nearby with quiet compassion, a mug of tea, a loving note, an invitation to take a walk around the neighborhood. These subtle acts, together with the warmth of her group, the therapy, and her friendship with Grace, started to form a net that helped Emily rise again, thread by thread, day by day. As her energy returned, Emily felt the urge to reconnect with old friends. She arranged to meet at Millersburg's little cafe, where laid-back conversation and shared memories felt like a salve. There she learned that life does go on just differently, and that mutual support is key when it comes to turning heartache into hope. By reclaiming small daily joys and rebuilding bonds, inside and out, Emily could finally glimpse the possibility of healing. The process was slow and imperfect, but she realized that forgiveness isn't an ending. It's a string of brave choices, day after day, betting that lightness can return to your life. It was early September when Grace, now much weaker, asked to see Emily in her quiet hospital room. Outside, autumn was turning the trees golden and red, while inside, everything felt suspended in time. Grace, pausing often to catch her breath, squeezed Emily's hand and, with a raspy voice, offered one last confession. Don't waste your life repeating your pain. When the end comes, only love and forgiveness truly matter. The look in her patient's eyes met Emily's, deep, calm, and unforgettable. That night, Emily walked through the hospital garden, wrapped in feelings of renewal and urgency. She felt pain and gratitude blending inside her. The certainty that she couldn't ignore Grace's words or keep putting off her hardest reckoning. Seeing Mark and herself without the filter of anger. The decision brewed quietly in her heart. She would talk to him, not to start over, but to finally share what she felt, openly and honestly. They met at home, right where everything had begun. Mark seemed anxious, ready for justifications or blame. But this time Emily was different. She sat at the table with a calm face and, for the first time in months, spoke without resentment. What happened between us broke me, but it also showed me a strength I didn't know I had. Her voice was steady as she described the pain, the disappointment, the loneliness. Mark, tearful, apologized and admitted the harm he'd caused. But Emily, surprisingly calm, told him forgiveness was now her responsibility, that he no longer held the power to shape her fate. The conversation was long, filled with tears and long silences. As they talked, Emily realized that by naming her pain and revealing her vulnerability, she was freeing a huge weight from her chest. She told Mark about the support she'd found, about Grace and the lessons she had learned. She explained that forgiveness wasn't about forgetting, but about choosing not to let that wound dictate the rest of her life. The relief of saying it all aloud was immediate, as if she could finally breathe without pain. At one point, overcome with emotion, Mark asked if there was a chance they could rebuild together. Emily, calm and steady, said she needed to put herself first. Forgiveness didn't mean going back. It meant self-respect and self-love after so much suffering. She sincerely wished Mark well, hoping he too would learn, grow, and find his own redemption. That very same weekend, Emily received news that Grace had passed away. She cried for hours, but at the same time felt something shifting deep inside. She knew this loss, while painful, was a turning point. Her soul felt lighter. The support of her parents was indispensable. Never pushing, always nearby with quiet compassion. A mug of tea, a loving note, an invitation to take a walk around the neighborhood. These subtle acts, together with the warmth of her group, the therapy, and her friendship with Grace, started to form a net that helped Emily rise again, thread by thread, day by day. As her energy returned, Emily felt the urge to reconnect with old friends. She arranged to meet at Millersburg's little cafe, where laid-back conversation and shared memories felt like a salve. There she learned that life does go on, just differently, and that mutual support is key when it comes to turning heartache into hope. By reclaiming small daily joys and rebuilding bonds, inside and out, Emily could finally glimpse the possibility of healing. The process was slow and imperfect, but she realized that forgiveness isn't an ending. It's a string of brave choices, day after day, betting that lightness can return to your life. It was early September when Grace, now much weaker, asked to see Emily in her quiet hospital room. Outside, autumn was turning the trees golden and red, while inside, everything felt suspended in time. Grace, pausing often to catch her breath, squeezed Emily's hand and, with a raspy voice, offered one last confession. Don't waste your life repeating your pain. When the end comes, only love and forgiveness truly matter. The look in her patient's eyes met Emily's, deep, calm, and unforgettable. That night, Emily walked through the hospital garden, wrapped in feelings of renewal and urgency. She felt pain and gratitude blending inside her. The certainty that she couldn't ignore Grace's words or keep putting off her hardest reckoning, seeing Mark and herself without the filter of anger. The decision brewed quietly in her heart. She would talk to him, not to start over, but to finally share what she felt, openly and honestly. They met at home, right where everything had begun. Mark seemed anxious, ready for justifications or blame. But this time Emily was different. She sat at the table with a calm face and, for the first time in months, spoke without resentment. What happened between us broke me, but it also showed me a strength I didn't know I had. Her voice was steady as she described the pain, the disappointment, the loneliness. Mark, tearful, apologized and admitted the harm he'd caused. But Emily, surprisingly calm, told him forgiveness was now her responsibility, that he no longer held the power to shape her fate. The conversation was long, filled with tears and long silences. As they talked, Emily realized that by naming her pain and revealing her vulnerability, she was freeing a huge weight from her chest. She told Mark about the support she'd found, about Grace and the lessons she had learned. She explained that forgiveness wasn't about forgetting, but about choosing not to let that wound dictate the rest of her life. The relief of saying it all aloud was immediate, as if she could finally breathe without pain. At one point, overcome with emotion, Mark asked if there was a chance they could rebuild together. Emily, calm and steady, said she needed to put herself first. Forgiveness didn't mean going back. It meant self-respect and self-love after so much suffering. She sincerely wished Mark well, hoping he too would learn, grow, and find his own redemption. That very same weekend, Emily received news that Grace had passed away. She cried for hours, but at the same time felt something shifting deep inside. She knew this loss, while painful, was a turning point. Her soul felt lighter. After the funeral, she walked alone through town and, looking up at a sky scattered with falling leaves, she felt at peace. The cycle was closed, and a new chapter was on the horizon, this time guided by acceptance, courage, and renewed hope. In the silence that followed losing Grace, and after her cathartic conversation with Mark, Emily found a kind of peace she'd never known before. In the early mornings, she was surprised by the lightness that replaced her old resentment. The pain hadn't disappeared, but it was no longer a burden. She woke up earlier, savored the autumn air as she walked the neighborhood, smiled at neighbors, and felt herself slipping back into the rhythm of life around her. With every step, new possibilities whispered, offering her a quiet kind of freedom built from small, transformative details. Returning to her hospital routine took on new meaning. Emily noticed that her patience and kindness began to surface naturally again. Caring for others now ran even deeper. She saw, without illusions, that every life is touched by imperfection, missteps, and second chances. She quietly shared her lessons about forgiveness and fresh starts with younger co-workers, becoming not just a technical authority but also a genuine, approachable guide for other staff and patients. Her brush with pain gave her new empathy for others' struggles with failure and reconciliation. At home, Emily made small changes. She redecorated her room, brought fresh flowers into the living room, and framed new photos with her parents and friends. It was as if, in rearranging her physical space, she was also rebuilding herself. She started attending church group meetings more often, this time not just as a listener, but as an active participant, sharing her journey with people wrestling with loneliness or old hurts. Conversation, once painful, became a bridge, turning her own wounds into service for others. Her relationship with Mark settled into mutual respect. No more blame, no more resentment. They'd sometimes cross paths at local community events or around the hospital, but both maintained a respectful distance, bound by the honesty built from painful growth. Emily wished Mark well on his own path of self-discovery, understanding that healing was a personal, untransferable journey. This new level of maturity gave her a quiet sense of peace. She no longer needed anyone's approval or justification, just the truth, for herself and for others. Her parents, now at ease, noticed the transformation. The daughter who months before seemed weighed down by sadness now moved with renewed vitality, steadier steps, and a softer gaze. Emily cherished their presence more than ever, arranging Sunday lunches, celebrating family milestones, and creating lasting memories. The initial pain of betrayal had become a cycle of learning, an invisible legacy guiding every act of kindness and self-acceptance. As winter arrived, Emily embraced the seasons of change inside and out. At work, she began offering workshops on self-care and emotional health for her colleagues, teaching that wounds, when approached with honesty and patience, could become sources of strength and inspiration. Her garden bloomed again, this time with flowers she had planted herself, a quiet symbol of her new beginning. That Christmas, Emily sat at her table surrounded by loved ones, feeling whole despite the absences and the marks left by the past. She remembered Grace, her friend's words, and the comfort she found in sharing her pain. Eyes closed, she gave thanks for everything. For the love she'd known, the heartbreak, the grief, and the hard-won forgiveness. She understood at last. Life would never be perfect, but it was now authentic, real, open to new encounters and paths. Gradually, Emily discovered a new kind of bravery inside herself. The courage to live fully, without fear of being hurt again, to trust the process of life with humility. Forgiveness, she realized, was more about the present than the past, more hope than forgetting, more self-love than anything about the other person. Transformed, Emily welcomed her future with open arms, ready for new joy and new stumbles, knowing now that she had everything inside to begin again, as many times as needed. She had finally become the author of her own story, a woman grown wise and strong, who learned to turn pain into compassion, hurt into learning, and loneliness into a deep peace as gentle as autumn leaves falling to the ground. There are times in life when we find ourselves at a crossroads. In those moments, we can choose to be prisoners of our pain, or, with effort and faith, we can choose to turn pain into strength. Emily Parker's story is, above all, a lesson in the courage required to rebuild yourself, even when everything feels like it's falling apart. She proves there are no ready-made answers for suffering, and that each person treads their own unique path to forgiveness and healing. The power of forgiveness didn't erase Emily's scars or magically make disappointment vanish, but it brought something even more important: freedom. In forgiving, Mark wasn't the one who won. It was Emily who broke free from the chains of resentment, from endless cycles of self-blame, and from the weight of carrying questions that would never have answers. True forgiveness isn't about excusing the other person or minimizing your pain. It's about refusing to be forever tethered to what can no longer be changed. Emily didn't go back to being who she was before the betrayal. She became someone new, wiser, humbler in the face of her wounds, and more aware of the value in every new connection. Her willingness to seek help, to share her vulnerability, and to reconnect with the world is an inspiration for anyone who, at some point, felt that the only way out was to run away or shut down completely. The secret, maybe, lies in doing the opposite. Opening yourself up, even when you're hurting, to the possibility of being touched by life once again. The small rituals Emily reclaimed: tending the garden, making coffee for her parents, listening to stories at her support group, became the quiet seeds of a new beginning. After all, the biggest transformations usually start with the tiniest, everyday gestures, packed with meaning. It's in that space between resilience and gentleness, between fear and hope, that forgiveness makes its entrance. Not as a heroic act, but as a renewed choice day by day. Emily's journey teaches us that no pain has to last forever, and no betrayal should define who we are. On the contrary, our cracks, when faced head-on, become doors to new understandings about ourselves and others. Real maturity isn't about collecting experiences, but about accepting our limits and finding humanity, even in another's flaws. If you're listening right now and walking through the valley of disappointments, know that you're not alone. The path to forgiveness might seem daunting, because it requires you to face your own internal depths. But it is also a road to true freedom, to lightness, and, most of all, to rediscovering yourself. The past can shape us, but it doesn't have to trap us. May Emily's courage inspire in you today the desire to let go of what no longer serves you, to trust life again, and most importantly, to trust yourself. Maybe the forgiveness you've been waiting to receive from someone else is really the gift your own heart is longing for. Give yourself the chance to start again, stronger, fuller, and more at peace. Thank you for being here with us on this journey. Your presence and support mean the world, and it's what inspires us to keep sharing these stories. We're grateful to have you as part of our community. If this story touched you, let us know in the comments. Your voice makes all the difference. Let's keep exploring these journeys together. If this journey resonated with you, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell to explore more narrated stories on our channel.